Welcome back to the next chapter of our emotional journey. In part 2 of this gripping love story, we dive deeper into the fragile yet hopeful bond between Logan and Haley. 6 months have passed since Haley made the brave decision to give Logan a second chance, but the wounds of betrayal still linger. As Logan works tirelessly to prove his love and rebuild their trust, a shocking revelation threatens to shatter the fragile peace they've fought so hard to create. What happens when the ghosts of Logan's past resurface, bringing secrets that could destroy everything? And will love truly be enough to overcome the pain, the lies, and the battles ahead? Stay tuned as we unravel the twists and turns of love's redemption, the price of trust, a story of heartbreak, forgiveness, and the ultimate fight for love. 6 months had passed since Haley Brooks made the difficult decision to give Logan St. James a second chance. Their relationship, though fragile, was slowly finding its footing. The wounds of betrayal still lingered, but there was a glimmer of hope, a faint light that both of them clung to as they tried to rebuild what had been broken. Logan, once a man consumed by vengeance, had transformed in ways that even he hadn't thought possible. He no longer saw Haley as a pawn in his game of revenge, but as the woman who had unknowingly taught him the meaning of love and forgiveness. Every day he worked tirelessly to prove his sincerity, not through grand gestures but through the small, meaningful actions that spoke volumes. He would wake up early to prepare her favorite breakfast, pancakes with fresh strawberries and whipped cream. He would leave handwritten notes on her desk, reminding her of how much she meant to him. And every evening he would sit beside her, listening intently as she shared the details of her day. But despite his efforts, Logan could sense the invisible wall that still stood between them. Haley smiled at him, laughed at his jokes, and even allowed herself to enjoy his company, but there was a guardedness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. It was as if she was waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Logan to revert to the man who had once plotted to destroy her. Haley, on the other hand, was caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She couldn't deny that Logan had changed. His actions were genuine, his words heartfelt, and his eyes, those piercing blue eyes, held a vulnerability that she had never seen before. Yet, the memory of his betrayal was a shadow that loomed over her heart. She wanted to believe in him, to trust that the man he was now was the man he would always be. But trust, once shattered, was not so easily mended. One crisp autumn evening, Logan surprised Haley with a drive to the countryside. The golden hues of the setting sun bathed the landscape in a warm glow as they arrived at a secluded hilltop. Haley stepped out of the car, her breath catching as she took in the view. Rolling fields stretched out before them, dotted with wildflowers swaying gently in the breeze. In the distance, a small wooden bench sat beneath a towering oak tree, its leaves a fiery mix of red and orange. "This place," Logan began, his voice soft, almost hesitant. "It's where I used to come with my mom when things got difficult at home." Haley turned to him, her curiosity piqued. Logan rarely spoke about his past, and when he did, it was always with a guarded tone. But tonight, there was something different, a rawness, a need to share a part of himself that he had kept hidden for so long. He used to tell me that no matter how chaotic life got, there would always be places like this, places where you could find peace, even if it was just for a little while, Logan continued, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "After she passed, I stopped coming here. It felt wrong, like I didn't deserve the peace she wanted me to have." Haley's heart ached at the pain in his voice. She stepped closer, her hand instinctively reaching for his. "Logan." He turned to her, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I brought you here because I want you to know that I'm trying, Haley. I'm trying to be the man you deserve. And I know I've hurt you in ways I can never take back, but I need you to know that you're my peace now. You're the reason I want to be better." For a moment, Haley was at a loss for words. The sincerity in Logan's voice, the vulnerability in his expression, it was almost too much to bear. She wanted to throw her arms around him, to tell him that she believed in him, that she loved him. But the scars of the past held her back. Instead, she squeezed his hand gently and offered him a small, tentative smile. "Thank you for sharing this with me, Logan. It means a lot." Logan nodded, his lips curving into a faint smile. He didn't push for more, didn't demand words of reassurance or promises she wasn't ready to give. He simply stood beside her, content to share the moment in silence. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in shades of twilight, Haley found herself wondering if maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for them after all. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of hope. And for now, that was enough. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Logan St. James's office, casting long shadows across the sleek modern furniture. Logan sat at his desk, reviewing a stack of reports, his brow furrowed in concentration. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of rebuilding. Not just his relationship with Haley, but also his company, which had suffered during the chaos of his personal vendetta. He had thrown himself into his work, determined to prove to Haley and himself that he could be a better man. A sharp knock at the door broke his focus. Without looking up, he called out, "Come in." The door opened, and his assistant, Claire, stepped inside, her expression unusually tense. "Mr. St. James, there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent." Logan glanced at her, his irritation evident. "I don't have time for unannounced visitors, Claire. Reschedule." "She says her name is Elizabeth St. James," Claire interrupted, her voice hesitant. "She claims to be your sister." Logan froze, the pen in his hand hovering mid-air. For a moment he thought he had misheard. "What did you say?" "She says she's your sister," Claire repeated, her tone softening. "Should I send her away?" Logan's mind raced. He had no siblings, at least none that he knew of. His mother had never mentioned another child, and his father had been dead for years. Or so he thought. "Send her in," he said finally, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. Moments later, a woman stepped into the office. She was in her late 20s, with striking features that bore an uncanny resemblance to Logan's. Her dark hair was pulled into a sleek ponytail, and her sharp green eyes met his with a mixture of determination and apprehension. She was dressed impeccably in a tailored blazer and pencil skirt, exuding an air of confidence that reminded Logan of himself. "Logan," she said, her voice calm but firm, "I'm Elizabeth St. James." Logan leaned back in his chair, studying her intently. "You've got my attention. Now, tell me why you're here." Elizabeth hesitated for a moment, as if weighing her words carefully. "I know this is a lot to take in, but I'm your sister. We share the same father." Logan's jaw tightened. "My father is dead." Elizabeth shook her head. "No, he's not. He's alive, Logan, and he's the reason I'm here." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging heavily in the air. Logan's mind reeled. His father, the man who had abandoned him and his mother, was alive? It was a possibility he had never considered, a truth he wasn't sure he wanted to face. "Then how should I believe you?" he asked, his voice cold. "For all I know, you could be lying." Elizabeth reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph, placing it on the desk in front of him. Logan's breath caught as he stared at the image. It was a picture of his father, older but unmistakable, standing beside a younger Elizabeth. The resemblance between them was undeniable. "I didn't come here to cause trouble," Elizabeth said softly. "I came because I thought you deserved to know the truth. Our father, he's not the man you think he is, and he's not done hurting people." Logan's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Elizabeth hesitated again, her composure faltering for the first time. "He's running a company, a competitor of yours, and he's been working with Robert Brooks." The mention of Haley's father sent a jolt of anger through Logan. "Robert Brooks?" he repeated, his voice laced with disbelief. "What does he have to do with this?" I don't know all the details, Elizabeth admitted, but I do know that they've been working together to undermine your company, and I thought you should know. Logan leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. Why now? Why come to me after all these years? Elizabeth met his gaze, her green eyes unwavering. Because I didn't know about you until recently. Our father, he never mentioned you. I found out by accident, and when I did, I knew I had to find you. I had to warn you. Logan's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, confusion, betrayal. He didn't know whether to believe her or to throw her out of his office, but the photograph, the undeniable resemblance, and the mention of Robert Brooks made it impossible to dismiss her entirely. Before he could respond, the door to his office opened again, and Haley stepped inside. She paused, her eyes flickering between Logan and Elizabeth. Am I interrupting something? Logan stood, his expression softening as he turned to her. Haley, this is Elizabeth. She says she's my sister. Haley's eyes widened in surprise, but she quickly composed herself. It's nice to meet you, Elizabeth, she said politely, though her tone held a hint of caution. Elizabeth offered a small smile. You must be Haley. Logan's told me about you. Haley glanced at Logan, her brow furrowing slightly. He has? Logan cleared his throat, sensing the tension in the room. Elizabeth was just leaving, he said, his tone firm. We'll continue this conversation another time. Elizabeth nodded, her expression unreadable. Of course, I'll be in touch. As she left the office, Haley turned to Logan, her concern evident. What's going on, Logan? Who is she? Logan sighed, running a hand through his hair. She claims to be my sister, and she says my father is alive. Haley's eyes widened. Your father? But I thought— Oh, did I? Logan interrupted, his voice tinged with frustration. But apparently I was wrong. Haley stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. Logan, are you okay? He looked at her, his expression softening. I don't know. I don't know what to think. Haley hesitated, then said gently, Maybe you should hear her out. If she's telling the truth, this could be your chance to get some closure. Logan shook his head. Closure? Haley, the man abandoned me and my mother. He left us to fend for ourselves while he started a new life. I don't need closure. I need answers. Haley frowned, sensing the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. Just promise me you'll think about it, okay? Don't shut her out completely. Logan sighed, his shoulders sagging. I'll think about it, but I'm not making any promises. As Haley nodded, Logan couldn't shake the feeling that Elizabeth's arrival was just the beginning of something much bigger, something that could unravel everything he had worked so hard to rebuild. The days following Elizabeth's unexpected arrival were a blur of tension and unanswered questions. Logan St. James had always prided himself on being in control, but now his carefully constructed world felt as though it was teetering on the edge of collapse. The revelation that his father was alive and working with Robert Brooks was a truth he wasn't ready to face. Yet, the photograph Elizabeth had shown him haunted his thoughts, a constant reminder that the past he had buried was clawing its way back to the surface. Haley watched Logan closely during this time, her concern growing with each passing day. He had become more withdrawn, spending long hours in his office and speaking little about what was on his mind. She wanted to help him, to ease the burden he was carrying, but she also knew that pushing him too hard could backfire. Logan was a man who valued his independence, and she had learned the hard way that he needed to come to her on his own terms. One evening, as Haley was tidying up the living room, she noticed Logan sitting on the couch, staring at the photograph Elizabeth had left behind. His expression was a mixture of anger and pain, and it broke her heart to see him like this. Logan, she said softly, sitting down beside him, you've been quiet since Elizabeth came. Do you want to talk about it? He didn't respond at first, his gaze fixed on the photograph. Finally he spoke, his voice low and strained. I don't know what to believe, Haley. My father, he's supposed to be dead. That's what my mother told me. And now, out of nowhere, this woman shows up claiming to be my sister and telling me he's alive? It doesn't make sense." Haley placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle. "I know it's a lot to process, but maybe Elizabeth is telling the truth. The photograph, it's hard to deny the resemblance." Logan let out a bitter laugh. "The resemblance doesn't mean anything. For all I know, this could be some elaborate scheme to get to me. And the fact that Robert Brooks is involved, that only makes me trust her less." Haley hesitated, then said carefully, "What if she's not lying, Logan? What if your father really is alive? Don't you think you deserve to know the truth?" Logan turned to her, his blue eyes filled with a mixture of frustration and vulnerability. "The truth? The truth is that he abandoned me and my mother. He left us to fend for ourselves while he built a new life with another family. Why should I care if he's alive?" Haley's heart ached at the pain in his voice. She knew how deeply his father's abandonment had scarred him, how it had shaped the man he had become. But she also knew that running from the truth wouldn't bring him the closure he needed. "Because it's not just about him," she said gently. "It's about you, Logan. You deserve answers. You deserve to know why he left, why he never came back, and maybe, confronting him will help you let go of the anger you've been carrying for so long." Logan looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighed and nodded. "Maybe you're right, but I'm not ready to face him yet, not until I know more." Billy smiled softly, relieved that he was at least willing to consider the possibility. "Then let's find out more, together." The next day, Haley decided to take matters into her own hands. While Logan was at work, she began digging into the connection between his father and Robert Brooks. She started with the company Elizabeth had mentioned, a rival firm that had been making waves in the industry over the past few years. It didn't take long for her to uncover a troubling pattern. The company had been targeting Logan's business, undercutting his deals and poaching his clients. The more she dug, the clearer it became that this wasn't a coincidence. Haley's investigation led her to an old business journal that had belonged to her father. She found it tucked away in a box of documents in his study, a relic from a time when Robert Brooks had been at the height of his career. As she flipped through the pages, she came across a series of entries that mentioned Logan's father by name. The entries were vague, but they hinted at a partnership that had ended badly, with accusations of betrayal and financial ruin. Her heart sank as she realized the implications. If Logan's father and her father had a history, it could explain why Robert had been so adamant about keeping her away from Logan. But it also raised more questions than answers. What had happened between them? And why was Robert working with Logan's father now? That evening, Haley shared her findings with Logan. He listened intently as she laid out everything she had discovered, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "My father and Robert Brooks were business partners," he said, his voice laced with bitterness. "And now they're working together again to destroy me. Perfect." Haley placed a hand on his arm, her touch grounding him. "Logan, we don't know the full story yet. But I think it's clear that this isn't just about business. There's something personal going on here." Logan nodded, his jaw clenched. "You're right, and I'm going to find out what it is." The next day, Logan arranged a meeting with Elizabeth. He needed answers, and he was determined to get them. They met at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city, away from prying eyes. Elizabeth arrived promptly, her demeanor calm but guarded. "I wasn't sure you'd call," she said as she sat down across from him. Logan didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I need to know everything about our father, about his connection to Robert Brooks, about why you came to me now. No more half-truths." Elizabeth nodded, her expression serious. "I understand, and I'll tell you everything I know." She began by recounting her own story, how she had grown up believing she was an only child, how she had discovered Logan's existence by accident when she stumbled upon an old photograph of their father with a young boy. She explained how their father had built a new life after leaving Logan and his mother, and how he had kept his past a secret from everyone, including her. "But why now?" Logan pressed. "Why come to me after all these years?" Elizabeth hesitated, then said quietly, "Because I think he's planning something big, and I think it involves you." Logan's eyes narrowed. "What kind of plan?" "I don't know all the details," Elizabeth admitted, "but I know he's been obsessed with you for years. He's been watching you, studying your every move, and now, with Robert Brooks by his side, I think he's finally ready to make his move." Logan leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but there were still too many unanswered questions. One thing was clear, though. His father wasn't done with him, and whatever he was planning, Logan needed to be ready. The tension in the air was palpable as Logan St. James paced the length of his office, his mind racing with the revelations Elizabeth had shared. His father's betrayal, Robert Brooks' involvement, and the looming threat to his company were all pieces of a puzzle he couldn't yet solve. But one thing was clear. The past he had tried so hard to bury was coming back to haunt him, and this time, it wasn't just his life on the line. It was Haley's too. Haley had been his anchor through the storm, but even she couldn't hide her unease. She had spent the past few days trying to piece together the connection between their families, but the deeper she dug, the more questions arose. And now, with Robert Brooks back in the picture, the stakes had never been higher. It was late afternoon when Haley received the call. She was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, when her phone buzzed on the counter. The name on the screen made her stomach drop. Robert Brooks. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello?" she said, her voice cautious. "Haley," her father's voice came through the line, calm but firm. "We need to talk. In person." Haley's grip on the phone tightened. "What is this about, Dad?" "It's about Logan," Robert said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And about the truth you deserve to know." Haley's heart sank. She had spent months trying to reconcile her love for Logan with her loyalty to her father, but the tension between them had only grown. Now, it seemed, Robert was ready to confront the man who had once been his enemy, and Haley wasn't sure she was ready for what that confrontation would bring. "Fine," she said finally. "Where do you want to meet?" Later that evening, Haley found herself sitting across from her father in a private room at an upscale restaurant. Robert Brooks was as composed as ever, his sharp suit and confident demeanor a stark contrast to the turmoil Haley felt inside. She had always admired his strength, but tonight it felt more like a wall, one that kept her at arm's length. "I'm glad you came," Robert said, his voice measured. "I know things have been strained between us lately." Haley folded her arms, her expression guarded. "You mean since you tried to control my life and keep me away from Logan?" Robert sighed, his jaw tightening. "I was trying to protect you, Haley. Logan St. James is not the man you think he is." Haley's eyes narrowed. "And you think you are? You lied to me for years, Dad. You kept secrets about your past, about your connection to Logan's family. How am I supposed to trust you now?" Robert leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Because I'm telling you the truth now. Logan's father and we were business partners once. And when things went south, he betrayed me. He stole from me, Haley. He ruined my reputation and left me to pick up the pieces." Haley's breath caught. "And that's why you hate Logan, because of what his father did?" "It's not just that," Robert said, his voice rising slightly. "Logan is just like him. He's manipulative, ruthless, and willing to do whatever it takes to get what he wants. He used you, Haley. Don't forget that." Haley flinched at the reminder of Logan's betrayal, but she quickly shook her head. "He's changed, Dad. He's not the same man he was when this all started." Robert's expression softened slightly, but his tone remained firm. "People like Logan don't change, Haley. They just get better at hiding who they really are." Haley opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, the door to the private room swung open. She turned, her heart skipping a beat as Logan stepped inside, his expression a mixture of anger and determination. "Logan," she said, standing quickly. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," Logan replied, his gaze flickering to Robert. "But I think I already know." Robert stood, his posture rigid as he faced Logan. "You've got some nerve showing up here, St. James." Logan smirked, though there was no humor in his eyes. "And you've got some nerve dragging Haley into this mess. Whatever issues you have with me, leave her out of it." "This isn't just about you and me," Robert shot back. "This is about protecting my daughter from a man who's proven he can't be trusted." Logan's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to remain calm. "I made mistakes, yes, but I've done everything I can to make up for them. Can you say the same, Robert? Or are you too busy plotting with my father to destroy me?" Robert's eyes narrowed. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb," Logan said, his voice cold. "I know about your partnership with my father. I know you've been working together to sabotage my company. What I don't know is why." Haley's head snapped toward her father, her eyes wide. "Is that true, Dad? Are you working with Logan's father?" Robert hesitated, and in that moment, Haley saw the truth in his eyes. "It's complicated," he said finally. "But everything I've done has been for you, Haley, to protect you." Haley shook her head, her voice trembling. "Protect me? By lying to me? By trying to ruin Logan's life? How is that protecting me?" Robert's expression faltered, but before he could respond, Logan stepped forward. "This ends now," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Whatever you and my father are planning, I'm going to stop it. And if you think you can use Haley to get to me, you're dead wrong." Robert's gaze hardened. "You think you can take us on, St. James? You're out of your league." Logan smirked, his confidence unwavering. "We'll see about that." The confrontation left Haley reeling. As she and Logan left the restaurant, she couldn't shake the feeling that her world was unraveling. The two men she cared about most were locked in a battle that threatened to destroy everything she held dear, and she didn't know how to stop it. "Logan," she said softly as they walked to his car, "what are we going to do?" Logan glanced at her, his expression softening. "We're going to fight, Haley. Together. No matter what it takes." Haley nodded, her resolve strengthening. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. She wasn't going to let her father or Logan's destroy the life they were trying to build. They had come too far to give up now. The days following the confrontation with Robert Brooks were a whirlwind of tension and strategy. Logan St. James knew that the battle ahead wasn't just about protecting his company. It was about protecting Haley and the fragile life they were trying to rebuild together. The stakes had never been higher, and the enemies he faced were more dangerous than ever. His father, a man he had long thought dead, was now a shadowy figure pulling strings from the sidelines. And Robert Brooks, a man with everything to lose, was more determined than ever to tear him down. Logan sat in his office late one evening, the city lights twinkling outside the window. His desk was covered in documents, financial reports, legal filings, and a growing pile of evidence that pointed to the coordinated attack on his company. Elizabeth's warnings had proven true. His father and Robert were working together, using insider information and underhanded tactics to sabotage his business. Contracts were being stolen, clients were being poached, and rumors were spreading that Logan's company was on the verge of collapse. But Logan wasn't about to go down without a fight. Haley had been by his side through it all, offering her unwavering support, even as her own relationship with her father crumbled. She had spent hours poring over documents, searching for any clue that might give them an edge. And now, as she entered Logan's office with a folder in hand, her expression was a mixture of determination and concern. "I found something," she said, placing the folder on his desk. "It's a list of recent transactions from one of your father's shell companies. Look at this." Logan opened the folder and scanned the documents inside. His eyes narrowed as he read the details. "These are payments to some of my former clients," he said, his voice cold. "He's bribing them to break their contracts with me." Haley nodded. "And it gets worse. I traced one of the payments back to a company owned by my father." "They're working together, Logan. There's no doubt about it." Logan leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightening. "They're trying to bleed me dry. If I lose enough clients, the board will start to question my leadership. They'll force me out." Haley placed a hand on his arm, her touch grounding him. "We're not going to let that happen. We'll fight this, Logan. Together." Logan looked at her, his expression softening. "I don't deserve you, Haley." She smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but you've got me anyway." The next day, Logan called an emergency meeting with his legal team and top executives. The room was filled with tension as he laid out the situation, detailing the attacks on the company and the steps they needed to take to fight back. His team was loyal, but even they couldn't hide their concern. The odds were stacked against them, and the pressure was mounting. "We need to hit back," Logan said, his voice firm. "I want every contract reviewed, every transaction scrutinized. If there's even a hint of wrongdoing on their part, I want to know about it." One of his executives, a sharp-eyed woman named Rachel, spoke up. "What about the media? If we can control the narrative, we might be able to mitigate some of the damage." Logan nodded. "Do it. I want a press release out by the end of the day. Make it clear that we're not going anywhere." As the meeting continued, Haley sat quietly in the corner, taking notes and observing the team's dynamic. She was impressed by Logan's leadership, by the way he commanded the room and inspired confidence even in the face of adversity. But she also saw the strain he was under, the weight of the battle taking its toll on him. After the meeting, she pulled him aside. "You're doing everything you can, Logan. Don't forget to take care of yourself, too." Logan smiled faintly, though the exhaustion in his eyes was evident. "I'll be fine, Haley. I have to be." Meanwhile, Elizabeth was working behind the scenes to gather more information about their father's plans. She had been hesitant to get involved at first, but the more she learned about the man who had abandoned Logan and manipulated her, the more determined she became to help her brother. She knew she couldn't undo the past, but she could at least try to make things right. One evening, she showed up at Logan's apartment with a USB drive in hand. "I found something," she said, her expression serious. "It's a list of meetings our father has had with Robert Brooks over the past 6 months. They've been planning this for a long time." Logan took the drive and plugged it into his laptop. As he scrolled through the files, his anger grew. The evidence was damning emails, meeting notes, and financial records that detailed their coordinated efforts to destroy him. "This is it," Logan said, his voice cold. "This is what we need to take them down." Haley, who had been watching from the couch, stood and walked over to him. "What's the plan?" Logan looked at her, his determination unwavering. "We're going to expose them, publicly. If they want a war, I'll give them one." The next few days were a blur of activity as Logan and his team prepared to go on the offensive. They compiled the evidence, crafted a strategy, and reached out to trusted allies in the media. Logan knew the risks going public with the information could backfire if they weren't careful. But he also knew that staying silent would only give his enemies more power. On the morning of the press conference, Logan stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. Haley stepped into the room, her presence calming him. "You're ready for this," she said, her voice steady. "You've got the truth on your side." Logan turned to her, his expression softening. "I couldn't have done this without you, Haley." She smiled. "You don't have to do it alone, Logan. I'm with you. Always." As they left for the press conference, Logan felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, he felt like he had the upper hand. And with Haley by his side, he knew he could face whatever came next. The press conference was a turning point. Logan St. James stood before a room packed with reporters, cameras flashing as he delivered his statement. His voice was steady, his words carefully chosen, as he laid out the evidence of the coordinated attack on his company. He exposed the underhanded tactics of his father and Robert Brooks, presenting emails, financial records, and meeting logs that painted a damning picture of their conspiracy. "This is not just an attack on me or my company," Logan said, his piercing blue eyes scanning the room. "This is an attack on integrity, on the principles of fair competition. I will not stand by and allow these men to destroy what I've built, not for myself and not for the people who depend on me." The room erupted in questions, but Logan remained composed, answering only what was necessary before stepping away from the podium. As he exited the room, Haley was waiting for him in the wings, her expression a mixture of pride and concern. "You did great," she said softly, placing a hand on his arm. Logan exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "It's not over yet. They're not going to back down without a fight." Haley nodded, her resolve unwavering. "Then we'll fight. Together." The fallout from the press conference was immediate. News outlets picked up the story, and within hours the scandal was trending across social media. Logan's father and Robert Brooks were thrust into the spotlight, their reputations taking a hit as the evidence against them mounted. But Logan knew this was only the beginning. Men like his father and Robert didn't go down easily, and he braced himself for their retaliation. That retaliation came sooner than expected. 2 days after the press conference, Logan received a call from Elizabeth. Her voice was shaky, her usual composure replaced by fear. "Logan, you need to be careful. Our father, he's not going to let this go. He's planning something." Logan's grip on the phone tightened. "What is he planning, Elizabeth?" "I don't know all the details," she admitted, "but I overheard him talking to someone. He's going to hit you where it hurts the most." Logan's mind raced. His company was already under attack, but this felt different, more personal. And then it hit him. Haley. That evening, Logan returned home to find Haley in the living room going over some documents. She looked up as he entered, her smile fading when she saw the tension in his expression. "What's wrong?" she asked, setting the papers aside. Logan sat down beside her, taking her hands in his. "I think my father is going to come after you, Haley. He knows how much you mean to me, and he'll use that against me." Haley's eyes widened, but she quickly composed herself. "Logan, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to let him scare me away." Logan shook his head, his voice firm. "This isn't about fear, Haley. It's about keeping you safe. If something happened to you because of me, I'd never forgive myself." Haley squeezed his hands, her gaze steady. "We've come too far to let them tear us apart now. I'm not leaving, Logan. We'll face this together." Logan wanted to argue, but the determination in her eyes silenced him. He knew she was right. They were stronger together, and he couldn't protect her by pushing her away. The next few days were a blur of chaos. Logan's father and Robert Brooks launched a counterattack, using their influence to discredit Logan and his company. False accusations flooded the media, and several of Logan's key clients began to waver. The pressure was mounting, and Logan knew he had to act fast. It was Elizabeth who provided the breakthrough. She arrived at Logan's office late one night, a folder clutched tightly in her hands. "I found something," she said, her voice urgent. "It's a recording of a conversation between our father and Robert. It proves everything. The sabotage, the bribes, the threats. This is the smoking gun." Logan took the folder, his heart pounding as he listened to the recording. It was damning, more than enough to take them down, but using it came with a cost. "If we release this," Logan said, his voice heavy, "it'll destroy them. But it'll also destroy you, Elizabeth. Your name is all over this. Are you sure you're ready for that?" Elizabeth hesitated, her expression conflicted. "I've spent my whole life trying to live up to his expectations, trying to earn his approval. But I see now that I was just a pawn in his game. If exposing him means losing everything, then so be it. I'd rather lose everything than keep living a lie." Logan nodded, his respect for her growing. "Thank you, Elizabeth, for everything. The next morning, Logan and Haley held another press conference, this time with Elizabeth by their side. They presented the recording, laying bare the full extent of the conspiracy. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Logan's father and Robert Brooks were hit with lawsuits, investigations, and public outrage. Their empires crumbled, and their influence waned. But the victory came at a cost. Elizabeth's involvement in the scandal made her a target, and she was forced to step away from her career to rebuild her life. Logan offered her his support, promising to help her in any way he could. As for Haley, the ordeal brought her closer to Logan than ever before. She had stood by him through the darkest moments, and, together, they had emerged stronger. The scars of the past hadn't disappeared, but they had learned to face them together, to build a future on a foundation of trust and love. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of their apartment, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, Logan turned to Haley, his expression soft. "I couldn't have done this without you," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "You've been my rock, Haley, my reason to keep fighting." Haley smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "And you've been mine. We're a team, Logan, always." Logan wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of peace. The battle was over, and though the road ahead wouldn't be easy, he knew they could face it together. The weeks following the press conference were a whirlwind of change. Logan's St. James had won the battle, but the war had left scars. On his company, his relationships, and his sense of self. The fallout from the scandal had been swift and brutal. His father and Robert Brooks were facing legal consequences, their reputations in ruins, but the damage they had inflicted on Logan's business was undeniable. Contracts had been lost, trust had been shaken, and the road to recovery seemed daunting. But Logan wasn't a man who gave up easily. Haley watched as Logan threw himself into rebuilding his company. He worked long hours meeting with clients, reassuring investors, and implementing new strategies to restore confidence in St. James Enterprises. She admired his determination, but she also worried about him. The weight of the past few months had taken its toll, and she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. One evening, as Logan sat at his desk, poring over financial reports, Haley entered the room with 2 cups of coffee. She placed one in front of him and sat down across from him, her gaze steady. "You need to take a break," she said gently. Logan looked up, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I can't afford to take a break, Haley. There's too much to do." "You can't rebuild an empire if you burn yourself out," she countered. "You've been working nonstop for weeks. You need to rest, Logan, for your sake and for mine." Logan sighed, leaning back in his chair. I can't shake the feeling that I need to prove myself. To the board, to the clients, to everyone who doubted me." Haley reached across the desk, taking his hand in hers. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone, Logan. The people who matter already believe in you. I believe in you." Her words seemed to ease some of the tension in his shoulders, and he gave her a grateful smile. "What would I do without you?" "You'll never have to find out," she said softly. As the weeks turned into months, Logan's efforts began to pay off. Slowly but surely, St. James Enterprises regained its footing. Clients who had been hesitant to renew their contracts returned, impressed by Logan's resilience and integrity. The media, once eager to tear him down, began to shift their narrative, praising his leadership in the face of adversity. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. Logan's father and Robert Brooks continued to fight the legal battles against them, using every resource at their disposal to delay the inevitable. The lawsuits dragged on, and while Logan was confident in his case, the constant reminders of their betrayal weighed heavily on him. Haley, too, faced her own struggles. Her relationship with her father had been irreparably damaged, and though she tried to reach out to him, Robert remained distant and unrepentant. It hurt her to see the man she had once admired reduced to a shadow of himself, consumed by his own bitterness and pride. But she found solace in Logan, in the life they were building together. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of their apartment, Logan turned to Haley, his expression thoughtful. "Do you ever think about leaving all of this behind? Starting fresh somewhere new?" Haley looked at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean, everything we've been through. The company, the scandals, the family drama. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it, if we'd be happier just walking away and building a life somewhere else." Haley considered his words, then shook her head. "I think we've already started fresh, Logan. Not by running away, but by facing everything head on. We've been through hell, but we've come out stronger. Together." Logan smiled, his heart swelling with love for the woman who had stood by him through it all. "You're right. As long as I have you, I can face anything." Haley leaned her head against his shoulder, her voice soft. "And as long as I have you, I know we'll be okay." In the months that followed, Logan and Haley continued to rebuild not just their professional lives, but their personal ones as well. They made time for each other, carving out moments of peace and joy amidst the chaos. They took long walks in the park, cooked dinner together, and talked late into the night about their hopes and dreams for the future. Elizabeth, too, began to find her footing. Though her involvement in the scandal had forced her to step away from her career, she used the opportunity to start fresh. With Logan's support, she launched a non-profit organization dedicated to helping victims of corporate corruption, using her own experiences as a driving force for change. It wasn't the life she had envisioned for herself, but it was one that gave her a sense of purpose and fulfillment. As for Logan's father and Robert Brooks, their downfall was slow but inevitable. The lawsuits against them gained traction, and the evidence Logan had presented proved too damning to ignore. Their empires crumbled, and they were left to face the consequences of their actions. Logan felt no satisfaction in their defeat, only a sense of closure. The men who had tried to destroy him no longer held any power over his life. 1 year after the press conference that had changed everything, Logan and Haley stood on the balcony of their apartment, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. The scars of the past were still there, but they no longer defined them. They had built something stronger, something unbreakable. "To new beginnings," Logan said, raising a glass of wine. Haley smiled, clinking her glass against his. "To us." As they stood together, the future stretched out before them, full of promise and possibility. They had faced the worst and come out stronger, and they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together.